What's up, everybody? Hope you're having a good weekend, Sunday. I hope the weather is treating you well. Here in Indiana, it's actually doing pretty awesome. I think today it was close to 50 something, I think, if I remember right. I know that I said that I was going to make a video earlier today, but I kind of got wound up into things. Um, so there's been a little bit of an issue lately with my truck. Nothing major or a change. I've been having this. Okay, where should I even begin? So last week I was pulling out, getting ready to head out to work, and I live basically right by an elementary school. It's like right across the street from me, and the parents all line up along the road, and I've got this street that intersects with my main street that's right in front of my house. And whenever the parents and everybody are dropping their kids off, the uh, the the bus usually comes up to the stop sign that's right there at that inner exchange or interface or what am I looking? What word am I looking for? Intersection. Got CRS or something. The buses come up to that intersection. They'll stop. They'll turn. Blah blah blah. Well, as I was backing out of my house that morning, I think it was maybe Wednesday morning, something like that. Tuesday, Wednesday. I was backing out in my truck, and I saw this one of the bus drivers trying to wave me down. And I was thinking to myself, "What now? Is my truck on fire or something?" I'll tell you what, some of the luck that I've had with my damn truck, man, it wouldn't surprise me if it was on fire. But thankfully, it was nothing major. She just said she opens up her little slide open window and she says, "Hey, just wanted to let you know that you've got a backup light out on your driver's side." And I was like, "Okay, thanks." Blah blah blah. So later that evening, I get back home. I'm trying to poke a stick at it, see what the hell's going on. I take the lighting enclosure off, take the bulb harness out, and I start looking at the bulbs to see if they're messed up or something. And usually whenever this kind of thing happens, it's usually something pretty trivial. You'll think, well, okay, I just got a burnt bulb or some shit. So I start looking at the bulbs, and everything's looking okay. I put the lights on from inside the cab, and the passenger side is fine, but the driver's side, all of those appear to be out. So what the hell is going on? And what I did first was this I'm never gonna let this up for myself because I feel like a complete ass for doing this. But what I did was I instead of just crawling under the stupid truck and looking at some of the wires and stuff under there, I think I remember taking all of the bulbs out. Uh, well, basically all of the bulbs and grabbing my multimeter and trying to poke around and shit and everything else like that. Because I at that point I had tried different bulbs, nothing was working. And remember, this is on the driver's side. This isn't on the passenger side. The passenger side is perfectly fine. So at this point, I've got all the bulbs out. I've got the wiring harness completely out of the tail light enclosure or the plastic piece, that covers your bulbs. I'm sitting there looking at the wires, looking at the sockets, looking at all this stuff, trying to think to myself, man, did something like has something severed or is blown out, or I'm sitting there looking at things trying to see if there's any kind of melted plastic or anything like that. So I'm kind of at a loss at this point because I'm not really thinking to myself, well, it's probably something simple if I just get under the truck or something, because it's for me, I instinctively react in ways where I'm automatically assuming burnt computer boards or, corrupt data somewhere, or just, I'm always expecting the worst. I'm not expecting something simple. Because most time in my life, man, it usually is the worst kind of scenario that happens for me. So anyway, I'm at a loss at this point, and I'm getting on Chat GPT, telling him what's going on, and or telling it what's going on, and trying to get some sort of idea about things that I can kind of look at and assess, diagnose, whatever. And for some reason, one thing that wound up popping out at me that it suggested was trying to use some sort of jumper to, to basically jump from one working socket's ground to another. And boy, oh boy, do I regret doing that, because I'm definitely not somebody who uh, knows much about wiring stuff. You know, I know just enough to cause some damage or maybe fix something that's relatively trivial, but for other things, you know, if I sit there and dick around with what GPT would refer to as a jumper wire or something, chances are I'm going to wind up causing some problems. And that's kind of what happened this time around. It's still nothing major, but it's just something that's man, I've been beating myself up over it the entire weekend. So with the or the jumper wire in mind, this concept in mind, I decided to go back out to the garage. Excuse me. And I'm sitting there with this spare piece of wire, trying to fuck around with poking it in the socket from one thing to the other, thinking to myself, what the hell am I doing? And for whatever it's worth, I can't really substantiate yet that I made contact with anything when I was doing this stuff, because I still think for the life of me that whenever I was sitting there poking one end of the wire in one of the sockets in a stupid effort to try to somehow jump this socket, uh, I still don't think that I touched the other end on any bare metal or anything. But for whatever it's worth, whenever I was sitting there dicking around with that wire, the because at the time, what was going on? Actually, I let me reframe this real quick. I kind of lied to you because I'm getting lost in some of the details that I've been going through this entire weekend. So bear with me. Two light bulbs were working. The one that wasn't was the reverse light. Okay, so on my make and model truck, I've got three bulbs on the driver's side and the passenger side. The top one, I believe, is basically the brake bulb. The one in the middle is your turn signal, and then the one on the bottom is the reverse or backup light, and that only gets turned on whenever you got it in reverse and you're backing out. So anyway, the reverse light wasn't working. The other two were. Okay, and instead of getting underneath the truck and looking at some possibility of cut wires or something, I instead decided to jump all the way to rigging up some sort of jumper thing or something, because at the time, I'm sitting there kind of emotionally wound up. I'm not thinking clearly. I'm thinking the worst, because half the time in my life, whenever I'm dicking around with this truck, there usually is kind of like a worst case scenario that's in play. I was just an emotional mistake that I did here. But with that being said, when I was sitting here trying to diagnose some of this shit, I decided for whatever reasons to take the first bulb out, leaving the other two in. And I remember seeing that middle light still on, because I think in my make and model, whenever it's in park, or whenever you got the parking brake on, and say for example you've got it in reverse, obviously chalked up underneath for your own safety. Uh, in my mind, for some reason at that time, I thought that was a good way to test everything. For the most part, it was, but in reality, you didn't really have to go that far with it. You could have just turned the stupid little light dial inside the cab to the on position. I don't know why I was thinking like that, or why I wasn't thinking like that, but because I should have been. But anyway, long story short, when I was digging around with that stupid wire, I don't know what happened, man. But I remember putting one end of the wire, this spare piece of wire that I had, in the socket, and I swear to God, I don't remember touching anything with the other end. But as soon as I did that, that middle light went out. So at this point in time, I'm thinking to myself, "Oh God damn it, what have I done?" And it's like I'm just making matters worse. And it was at that time I finally decided to crawl my fat ass underneath the truck, sit there and look up at the wiring that was essentially connecting to my tail light harness. And lo and behold, I saw a green wire that had been severed. And I believe that it probably happened from some stuff that I had done a couple years ago by this idiot that I hired at like $700 to spray some anti-rust type stuff on the frame. And that's another long story. But I think what happened was that they probably severed this damn thing and basically never reconnected it. So anyway, I get under there. I rewire this thing. I'm twisting it up, putting some electrical tape on it, and then voila, the freaking reverse light comes back on. But now the other two lights are off. Oh my God, is this day ever going to end? To make a long story short, I went ahead and ordered some replacement parts from Amazon. The first thing that I ordered was two replacement sockets that I not gonna wire up. I was thinking at that time, again, at me being an emotional reaction type of person, I ordered that thinking that, well, okay, push comes to shove, maybe I ended up somehow burning one or both of those sockets out. So I got those delivered yesterday. Haven't used them or anything like that. But the thing that I did try to use today is the replacement tail light assembly, and I ordered. It was one single product that comprised of both lights and assemblies, the left and right uh, lighting enclosure, as well as the left and right bulb wiring harnesses. So I swapped out the driver side wiring or lighting harness. Same goddamn thing, man. Those two lights aren't coming on. And what it is it's those lights that automatically turn on. That if you turn with my make and model, if you twist the light switch in your cab that's right left to the steering wheel, once to the left, it turns them off. So it's like I don't know what it is. I call them running lights. I don't think that's really what the technical term is, though. It's like auto lights, the kind of lights that automatically turn off with the light sensor or whatever. But the good news is that whenever I turn those running lights off, it looks completely normal. so so I can drive it at least to the shop and have them look at it without much fear of a ticket, at least. I can't imagine though how much it's going to run to fix. Hopefully it won't cost that much, but man, who knows with the way things are anymore. But that's something that I've been dicking around with all weekend, and basically for the most part most of last week, because I've been kind of stressing about it and trying to figure out what the hell's going on. Because in my life, man, usually something like this turns out to be a need to be replacing your ECM, and the ECM is discontinued. In order to have it, refurbished or something, you've got to wait a month. And I shit you not, man, I've been through that type of thing. I even went through something similar to that with this actual exact truck about, I think, a year and a half ago. Because with this make and model of truck that I have, I had the older engine swapped with a remanufactured engine from this company named Jasper Transmission and Engines. And the engine that I have now, I mean, I think for the most part it's a healthy engine, but there's little things here and there that you're just not completely sure about, and like hard starts sometimes, and just weird shit, man. You just never know what the hell's going on. And in some of the quest of trying to figure out what the hell was going on with some of that kind of stuff, there was one time when I brought it over to my local Chevy dealership to try to have one of their mechanics look at it. And during some of that work, he had to send off I believe it was the ECM to have it refurbished, because whenever he was sitting there trying to test stuff out, he connected one of his scanners, I guess, to it and wound up burning it up somehow. And that took it took about a month for that to get done. So I speak from experience whenever I say, some of this kind of shit, man, it turns out to be something way more than what it should be. But, I mean, considering the fact that my truck is basically 20 some odd years old now, I mean, it's not really surprising to a degree, but it doesn't really lessen the sting whenever it happens. So, anyway, man, that's one reason that I didn't upload a video as soon as I said I was going to try to, because I know I said in my last RimWorld video that I was going to try to upload something between 3 and 6 or whatever, but That's just kind of how it happens. And so now I've just got to kind of get by with what I've got, man. Thankfully, I'm fortunate enough to have another vehicle. So I'm going to drive that tomorrow into work. And then on Tuesday, I'm going to try to get the truck over there to the shop and have them hopefully fix this wiring issue. I know, I think I know what the problem is, because when I was underneath the truck looking at all this stuff, again, a couple of years ago, I had got some goofballs take the bed of the truck off so that they could spray down the frame with some anti-rust type stuff. And I know for a fact that whenever they did that, they screwed something up. And whenever I was under there, right above the spare tire and above the cross member that supports the bed of the truck, there's an amount of wiring that connects to the wiring harness that is all taped up and shit. And I can't really get up there, in with what I have here at my house to screw around with that. Because to get it done right, either somebody's going to have to take the entire bed of the truck off to get to it, or they're going to have to raise it up so that they have some level of better access somehow. So I don't really know where all this is going to go, man, but that's really been on my mind lately, because whenever stuff like this happens, man, I get kind of stressed out, because I've got a little two-seater convertible that I don't like to drive in bad weather, and I know that I'm fortunate enough to have something like that, and not everybody has things like that. So I completely recognize that, man. So whenever I sit here and talk about this stuff, I'm sure I probably come across as a little bit of a pretentious asshole or something, and I don't really mean to. But I mean, in my defense, I've worked really hard for the things I've got too. So I mean, there is that. But with that being said, I lucked out in getting the car that I have, and I can get by on it as long as there's not really super bad weather. I never drive the damn thing out in like icy roads or something, because it just simply can't do that. I sometimes drive it out in rain if I absolutely have to, but I can't stand doing it whenever I do. And so I got this truck thinking that, that would be the truck that I use on all weather scenarios, or in all weather scenarios. And for whatever it's worth, man, the truck that I bought, it's a 2006 Chevy Colorado, and when I bought it, it had about like 96,000 miles on it. And I think I bought it at the time for about 7 grand. So I mean, it's not as if it's some sort of really fancy truck or anything. I'm lucky that it's lasted as long as it has. Uh, but yeah, man, that's been a big ticket item lately. Um, I'm just trying to kind of get by with what I've got until I can get it into the shop and see what they say. But with other things that are kind of interesting, getting away from my issues here for a second. Uh, I don't know really what's going to happen out of this whole U.S. Iran thing. I'm sitting here right now looking at Yahoo News, and I'll bring it up here. Uh, Trying to play director here. Looks like we might be preparing for something. Now, from what I remember, we had one uh, carrier strike group over there already. I can't remember which one it was. But they've been over there for about a week and a half to 2 weeks, I think. And they just recently got done sending another one. And it's beginning to look like we might wind up in a little bit of a scuffle here soon. And this, to be quite honest with you, this is another example of efforts that I feel like the Trump administration is doing that conflicts against the MAGA principle. And I think I've said on here before that I've been that I'm a Trump supporter. I voted for Trump. I kind of feel unique in a way, because he's the only president that I've ever voted for in my entire life. Because up to him, I had never voted, mostly because I was too young to really understand the value of voting, but also just because I wasn't a political person. And I still, ironically, don't really consider myself a political person. I hate politics, man. But the thing is that the older I've gotten, the more I realize that the more you stay on the sidelines, the more the politics wind up paying attention to you. And so I think, what was it, 2016? Or let me see here. No, I didn't vote for Trump during his 2016 run, but I voted for him in 2020. In 2020, he lost. And the reason I decided to vote for him is because it was around that time that I saw all of these things going on in the world that I felt they just didn't add up in my mind. You know, a lot of the weird stuff that I felt personally were either unfair or just simply not right. I remember during some of those times there were a lot of those protests. The Summer of Love stuff was going on. I remember seeing some of the stuff with that Kyle Rittenhouse kid. Uh, a lot of the depictions that I saw online and in the news about these storefronts being looted and whatnot. And me personally, since I work for a university, so I've seen firsthand some of the bias that happens against conservatives. And for whatever it's worth, man, I don't really consider myself a conservative, but I definitely I lean more towards conservative values than I do any liberal kinds of ideologies. So, in 2016, he gets in. One thing leads to another, and I feel like he makes a lot of efforts to try to kind of counterbalance a lot of the stuff that was going on up to that point. And then 2020 comes around, I remember where I live, the small town that I live out here in the Midwest in Indiana. His campaign efforts up to 2020. I remember watching all of his rallies and stuff, and thinking to myself, he's a guy that I didn't feel completely as if I was being represented from my standpoint of the things that I value in my life, but he represented the majority of them versus his competitor. So I remember, watching those rallies, kind of getting a little more into the loop of things that were being talked about and things that he was cheerleading and stuff. And there was one day in my small Indiana town when one of those freaking Trump uh, caravans moved through our town, and I swear to God, it had to have been at least 10 miles long. It was the first time I had ever seen something like that, and I remember thinking to myself, my God, because it literally took, like, I don't know how many minutes it took for them to clear on, because what they did was they came up State Road 40 and then turned south, I guess, to hit uh, our Interstate 70 to go wherever it was that they were going. And it was so long and so I don't want to say rambunctious, but it was so I don't know, man. It was just the first time that I had ever seen something like that, and it was kind of breathtaking in many ways. So anyway, when there was all of this stuff that was kind of going on at that time, up leading up to 2020, and so I vote for him, and I see everything that happens during J6, and then at that point I begin to see all of the stuff that was going on from the J6 committee to all of the stuff that was making rounds in the media concerning his efforts to try to overturn things and all of this stuff that was just going on. It was overwhelming, man. And of course, during all of that shit was COVID, and I saw all of these things that were going on during the COVID lockdowns and the loss of agency that we all wound up suffering through. The people that were literally almost being encouraged to stalk other shoppers in grocery stores for the mere crime of not wearing fucking masks. All of this stuff, man, it began to mount up. And I think for the most part, it wound up mounting up for a lot of people. A lot of the normal fucking, salt of the earth types of people that saw these things going on and realized just how much lunacy it represented. And for whatever it's worth, I'm not against people wearing masks or anything like that. If you want to wear a mask, that's fine. But I think it's a different situation whenever you're going to get a gallon of milk and like someone like a greeter with his mask on is sitting there saying that you can't enter unless you have some sort of COVID passport or something. Because I know that over where I work, the president that we had at the time at our university mandated the COVID shots. And of course, they tried to pitch it as if it wasn't mandated. They tried to make it sound as if no, you don't have to get the COVID shot, but if you don't, then you need to walk all the way across campus, get tested every effing morning, and then come back and show your supervisor the results of your tests and everything. So you can sit there and say technically that it wasn't mandated, but everyone knows that it was. They coerced at minimum everyone that was working there to get that shot. And that's something that I'm never ever going to forgive that my employer for. And yes, I did get the shot. I got the first jab and then the second jab. I didn't get anything after that. I didn't get any boosters or anything. And I really technically can't say that it caused me any problems, but I mean, there have been some little things here and there that I sometimes sit back and I ask myself, man, I wonder if that was from the COVID shot. But it was, but for me at least, it hasn't been anything, major or tragic. And I'm still able to jog. I'm still able to work out. I know with my my alcohol consumption, I feel like I got a little bit of a beer gut developed, but I also think too though that some of that is my stereotypical Christmas winter holiday weight gain too, because every single year during winter I always gain a couple pounds. It just happens, and then during June or July is whenever I start to finally get rid of it because I'm always out there jogging on the street and stuff. And so anyway, but back to what I was saying though, up to that point, whenever Trump was rerunning for 2024, his entire platform seemed to kind of change from what he had done during his first term. During his first term, I think there was a little bit of a Roman type of betrayal because I think he was kind of surrounded by a lot of people that he couldn't have trusted very well, or at least that he later realized that he didn't trust. But then, whenever 2020 happened and he decided that he was going to run again for 2024, you saw him correct a lot of the mistakes that he made the first time. And he pivoted his whole entire platform around being America First, getting back to certain levels of common sense with a lot of stuff, getting certain levels of the education system under control, getting away from extremism, doing a lot of stuff that appealed to me. Now, and I say that with sensitivity because I understand that, first of all, there's a lot of stuff that I have to learn in life, and so by my saying a lot of this stuff, I recognize the fact that a lot of the stuff that feels appealing to me could very well be completely wrong. I understand, a lot of stuff, like for example, a lot of the views concerning gender types and stuff. Maybe I'm wrong in how I think like that, but at least right now, with what I understand about my life, myself, other people, and so forth, I don't believe in the whole gender fluid type stuff. I think you're either a man or a woman. I'm sorry. And if I get crucified for that, well, again, I recognize that I could be wrong in that. But at least as far as right now is concerned, that's kind of the way I'm convinced about thinking. But he tried to kind of go back more towards some sort of traditionalist type of mindset with a lot of his platform. And so I guess he reeled a lot of people in thinking that, well, whenever I get back in, it's going to be all about America First. And this is how I bring it all back around to this whole Iran thing. So now he gets in, here it is, 2024. And again, I'll preface all of this by saying that I'm still a Trump supporter. I still believe in my my commander in chief. I still want to support him, despite the fact that I don't agree with all of the stuff that he always does. But I think with this whole Iran thing that's going on, it's a piece of a larger chronic situation that I'm noticing in his 2024 run that's a little bit disturbing in my mind. So we've had this Ukraine stuff going on. We've had stuff with Gaza. We've had a massive amount of focus towards Venezuela. We've been focusing on Greenland. We're now dicking around with Iran, and if it wasn't for all that stuff, we'd probably talking about Taiwan, because there have been times where he's spoken about Taiwan too. That to me, I mean, oh yeah, and all the tension with Canada and all that kind of stuff. A lot of that stuff to me is not America First. And again, I still support the man, but I don't agree with us constantly being involved in all of these foreign things, regardless of whatever the justification is. And I sometimes worry that a lot of it is because of that Marco Rubio sitting there whispering sweet little nothings and manipulations into his ear. I've never really completely trusted Marco Rubio. Back in the day, I think it was what did he try to put his hat in the ring for presidency back in 20 was it 2016 or 2020? I can't remember. But back then he said some things that appealed to me, but at the end of the day I realized were stuff that I just couldn't really completely trust and get behind. I can't remember what they were, but he just doesn't really seem like somebody that I can really completely trust. And I worry a lot about whether or not Trump is sitting there getting manipulated by him. I hope I'm wrong, but I just know that in my first person perspective, out of the stuff that I see here in Terre Haute, Indiana, the job market effing sucks. I mean, it is an absolute disgrace, and I cannot emphasize that enough. A lot of it is because I work in tech or IT. I'm a PHP programmer. That's at least how I view myself. A PHP programmer, Drupal website developer, and UI specialist, or what I like to refer to as internet media delivery specialist. I view myself as being that type of shtick. And jobs around where I am for that type of stuff are almost non-existent. The only way you ever get into that kind of stuff is if you work for a university. And with the way the universities are, how they're heading nowadays, I mean, all they want is either a Microsoft product or some sort of thing that's vendor based. They want to try to shy away from homebrew type stuff. They don't want PHP servers because they view those as instantly being security hazards, which is ironic because any type of server that you set up, if it's not kept up to date and you don't have focus on it, sooner or later there's going to be something that can likely happen because that's just how it works. Any software can be vulnerable to security threats if you don't pay attention to it, which is ironic because at some point something will happen with the Microsoft stuff or the vendor stuff, and then who are you going to blame? It's just like it's almost like it's just moving or swapping out goalposts. And that's the weird thing in my field, at least right now in the university environment of IT. You've got a lot of these big shots that are running the show in these universities that are sitting there thinking to themselves that, well, if we go with this big Fortune 100 company's product, we'll be safe and we won't have to worry about threat vectors and, security footprints and all this stuff with clients and everything. We can just let Microsoft deal with it. And I've lost count to the number of times that Microsoft has made headlines over freaking data breaches. And of course, with me being who I am and seeing the things that I see during my meetings that I have in the place that I work, I see these people that know nothing about the kind of stuff that they have authority over, making these decisions that fuck me over then at the time at some point because again, I'm a PHP guy, so if I don't have my PHP server, then I can't really do the stuff that I feel like I'm qualified to do. But you've got those people that are in charge that are always doing that kind of stuff and making those kinds of decisions. And for whatever it's worth, man, I don't completely fault them because I understand how risky some things can be, especially if you're in a situation where you just don't have the resources to stay on top of every single thing that gets created on a PHP server. So I don't completely fault them, but it's just frustrating because, they tell you since kindergarten to follow your dreams, to follow your passions, do what you want to do to make a career out of. And so I chose PHP and websites and Drupal and all of these kinds of things. And when you're in the environment that I've been in for the past 15 years, you realize just how much change can happen as quickly as it can happen. And it's always instigated by people who don't know anything about the stuff that they have authority over. And it's just frustrating. And as a result, I've been trying to find, a way out. I've been applying to places left and right. I've had a few interviews here and there, but back to the whole Trump America First type thing. One thing that I've noticed in my area of the world is that the jobs that I wind up with interviews at or for, it's as if they want to hire a senior developer at intern wages. because every single place that I've interviewed at for the past year has tried to lowball me, and it's just not something that really fills me with much confidence about the world and where things are going. And whenever I go through this, I always wind up thinking about this stuff with Trump and how his administration is parking aircraft carrier strike groups over there in Iran or the shores of Iran or whatever, and focusing on Gaza and focusing on Ukraine and focusing on this and that and Venezuela and Canada and Greenland. And as I see all this stuff going on, I'm sitting here thinking to myself, man, all I want is just a job that I can go work at until about 4:30, and then come home and then just fucking forget about. Simple, not any kind of stress, no anxiety, enough to live on. Maybe if I'm lucky, have enough to one day retire from, and then just call it fucking quits. And then you've got this crap going on. And so I'm sitting here thinking to myself, what's America First anymore? And does this guy even remember what America First even is? I still support the guy, but that support is waning the more I see this type of crap going on. And the one thing that keeps me from cursing him out over this kind of stuff is whether or not he knows about stuff that we don't. And obviously, I mean, he's the president, so he's going to know plenty of stuff that we don't. But I mean, is it enough though to merit this type of action? I mean, what is it exactly that he's doing over there? I mean, why are we getting involved in Iran? I think everything that I've read so far makes it sound as if his intentions are to quash Iran's quashing of their protesters, and that to me doesn't. That's not justification enough for us to take two carrier strike groups over there. To say nothing about all the stuff that's going on in our country right now. And there are plenty of things going on in our country right now that deserve more prioritization than this. One being that I feel like he's got to get ahead of the education system, because there is a shit ton of stuff right now going on in the education system that he's not paying as much attention to as he needs to. And that's really infuriating. But with that being said, though, I don't know, man. I think one thing that he's done recently that I'm happy about is his attempt to try to deregulate the automotive industry. And my hope is that with some of the stuff that he's tried to attack with the CAFE standards, we'll wind up with a Chevy S10 again. From what little I understand, they actually have Chevy S10s. It's just not in the United States. And I think a lot of it is because of this whole emission standard stuff and the CAFE standards, Because if you do some research, you'll realize that one reason that passenger-sized trucks are as big as they are is because of the CAFE standards and everything that they represent and mandate for the automotive manufacturers. And it's a lot of that CAFE standard stuff that's resulted in bigger parts, needing more parts to control emissions. And as a result, what used to be the size of an S10 turns into the size of something like a whatever Silverado or something like that. And so now that he's trying to reel back a lot of that kind of stuff, my hope is that at some point we'll see GM or whoever start making things like the Chevy S10, the Ford Ranger, whatever. Because then at that point you're talking about a truck that's somewhere around $20,000 to $25,000, brand new, and that would be awesome. And I think if I remember right, some of those S10s used to have V6s. And that would be wonderful for me because, I mean, as much as I love my truck, my little Colorado, man, I got to be honest with you, fucking around with it every goddamn week, it really gets tiring, man. It gets so stressful and tiring, to say nothing about all the money that I've spent trying to get that thing to a point where I don't have to really worry that much about it anymore. But despite the fact that I get frustrated with my truck, man, it's still running like a little sewing machine. It's just those little things on the periphery that cause problems. Changing the subject a little bit, do any of you guys watch Zuffa boxing? I don't know if any of my viewers that might happen to watch my rambling here are into UFC, but I'm into UFC. I try to watch every UFC event that comes on. And one thing I love about Dana White, who's the main guy behind UFC, he's trying to diversify his portfolio of entertainment outlets. One thing is that what's it called? Power Slap. And one of these days, man, whenever there's another Power Slap event, I'm gonna like get on my YouTube channel and schedule a UFC slap Power Slap watch party. I'm really looking forward to doing that. But there's Power Slap, and then there's his Brazilian Jiu Jitsu thing that he's got going on now. And then there's this other thing that I call the JV UFC, which is like some sort of like lower caliber UFC. Uh, uh, I don't know. I don't know even what you call it. It's just a lower caliber UFC, and it's where most of the guys, I guess, go to and whenever they're trying to work their way up to the normal UFC. And I don't know really what it's called, but it's another thing though that's I find pretty entertaining because it's just more UFC just on a lighter level. But then he's recently come out with this thing called Zuffa Boxing, and I've been watching it here lately. I think it's on its third iteration or third event, if you will, if I understand it correctly. And I was just watching the middleweight Leo Ruiz and Casey. Let me see here. I've got a thing on here. Casey James Streeter, and Casey James Streeter, I guess, was the winner. And uh, it was a hell of a fight, to be honest with you. I didn't really expect to see much talent in this Zuffa boxing uh, market or whatever, but it turned out to be really awesome. So if you're into UFC, if you're into boxing and all that kind of shit, definitely check out Zuffa Boxing. He's got his, Zuffa Boxing YouTube channel out there. And if you can, man, you might want to subscribe to it if you're into UFC stuff too. Um, but one other thing I was going to talk about real quick, and I'll probably call it a night here. Um, with some of the stuff going on in the world, with work, with my personal life and everything, I've had this aspiration of one day uh, trying to go into business for myself. And one way I thought about trying to eventually do that is by making some sort of political website where I would not only do things like write op-eds or try to tie into YouTube channel content, but also create like a storefront where I could sell certain kinds of swag and I don't know, man, political meme shirts and subscriptions to certain kinds of services and things like that. And some of that effort has come to fruition after chats that I've had with Chat GPT. And I have a pretty good idea about how I'm going to pursue some of that kind of stuff. But one thing that I wanted to talk about real quick that I thought was interesting today. So with the day that I've had and the weekend and the past week that I've had, it's been fucking shitty, man. I've been in a kind of a dark place in my mind over stuff, trying to kind of get my head uh trying to get my head straight about stuff, trying not to stress about things, and just try to think clearly about my strategic steps in terms of how to progress in my life. I mean, we all go through that. I'm 42 years old, so it's not really surprising that there's things like that are going on in my mind. But whenever I get into these kinds of moods, one thing I usually try to do is get out there on ChatGPT and talk to it and explain. Well, usually what I do is I get out there, I explain what's going on. I try to provide as much detail as I can because we're talking about AI basically, and the more detail you give it, the more helpful it'll usually be with its responses. And so today wasn't really an exception to that. I get out there, I explain all this stuff that's going on in my life. I explain the stuff with my truck, the stuff that's going on at work, stuff that's going on with the house. All this stuff basically is like it was like an emotional dump. And I'm just kind of sitting there venting to it, almost like some sort of drive-through therapy session. And for whatever it's worth, man, if you've never done that, it goes without saying that you can't rely on AI. AI is not going to replace human connection and stuff like that. But if you're ever in a situation where you're down and depressed and stuff, believe it or not, give ChatGPT a chance to at least give you some perspective, because it's really, really wonderful with giving perspective on things. But I was sitting there trying to explain some of the stuff, and it eventually got to a point to where we started talking about this political website thing that I've got floating around in my mind, and some of the stuff I'm doing to try to gear up towards that. And one thing that I explained to it, and this is no joke, one thing that got me thinking about getting into politics, whether it be either through just some sort of silly little website, or whether it be through actually, running for positions in local councils or something. One thing that got me kind of desiring to get involved in politics was the situation that happened with Charlie Kirk. Because I remember the day that shit happened, I was at work. It was like about, I can't remember what time of the day it was, 2, 3, something like that. And at work, usually whenever I'm at work, sometimes I'll have on in the background some of those DC subcommittee meetings going on in the background, because they can usually be kind of fun to listen in on, and they can also be pretty interesting too, because some of those subcommittees that they have subcommittee streams about, you can really actually learn a lot about what's going on in DC and the world in general. I mean, like, they sometimes have stuff on there about like intellectual property rights, and sometimes they'll have stuff on there about Epstein, of course, and just kind of internal stuff related to certain secretarial positions, and how that person needs to come in to give their piece on whatever it is that's going on at the moment. So you get to hear a lot of first person stuff from the people that are actually involved in the respective situation, and it's really fun to listen in on sometimes. And sometimes I'll admit I kind of get off on listening in on all of the bickering. It's almost kind of like a political Jerry Springer sometimes, depending on who it is that's involved in the respective hearing. But anyway, this day that Charlie Kirk the Charlie Kirk thing went down, I was sitting there, same old type of situation. I had one of the committees or hearings on in the background or something like that. I think actually this time it was the House hearings, and I'm sitting there listening to it, working on my work, and I glance over at the chat that the channel had that I was listening in on at the time, and I see someone on their chat post something about how Charlie Kirk just got shot. And I was like, this has to be a joke, because every once in a while, for some of the UFC streams that I sometimes watch, there's always some jackass that's out there talking about Rip Joe Rogan, and I think it's a little bit of an ongoing joke for whatever reasons. It's like somebody always tries to start a thing in some of the UFC chats talking about how Joe Rogan's been killed in a car wreck or something like that. And it's probably not funny to joke about, but I can't help but laugh about it because of just how absurd it sounds. But this particular day, somebody posted a thing on there about how apparently Charlie Kirk got shot. And I was thinking to myself, well, it's got to be another, Rip Joe Rogan type thing. So I get out there on Twitter to see what the things are that are streaming or going viral. And I don't even have a Twitter account. I got off of Twitter a long time ago. But I have ways where I can kind of see what's going viral on Twitter. There's certain websites and stuff out there that allow you to kind of see those kinds of things. And there were some things on there about Charlie Kirk, and I began to kind of feel a little bit worried. And so I started looking at the areas on Twitter or X that I usually look at whenever I'm trying to get some sort of information about stuff that's going on. And I came across a post that showed Charlie Kirk getting shot from a distance. And I saw it immediately, and I started shaking my head. I remember thinking to myself, man, this has got to be a joke. This has just got to be some sort of AI thing. Somebody somewhere generated another one of those stupid kinds of fake videos or something. And I thought to myself, this has got to be bullshit. So I start doing a little more digging, and this time with more intention. And I'm sitting there pilfering through some of these people's X posts and things. And I come across this one video that showed a close-up of Charlie Kirk getting shot. And, he does the thing where he's leaning back and blood spurting from his fucking neck. And as soon as I saw that, man, I dropped my mouse and I was kind of almost shaking. And I was like, okay, man, I've got to get away from the fucking computer because what I saw I knew was real. It just there's certain things that you can kind of see in videos where you know something is real and you know something is AI. And this fucking shit, man, it was completely real. And so I literally had to get away from the computer. I remember going outside, just kind of going on a little bit of a walk to kind of calm down. And I don't normally get emotional about shit like that because it's not as if I'm a Charlie Kirk roadie or anything. Because I would see his stuff come up every once in a while on my YouTube feed, and sometimes I would watch it, sometimes I wouldn't. Sometimes I would listen to him talking about stuff that I disagree with and close out of it, and then there would be other times when he would say something that appealed to me, and I'd sit there and listen to it a little bit. But I never subscribed to his YouTube channel because I was never really a Charlie Kirk fan. I mean, I always viewed him as a good guy and somebody that was one of the good guys, but I wasn't one of those people though that subscribed to his content. I just wasn't, man. It's not really that I didn't find him intelligent or anything like that. I thought the kid was insanely intelligent, but he just, to me at the time at least, he wasn't as appealing or as entertaining to me as someone like Tim Pool is. And again, Tim Pool, I know he's not everyone's cup of tea too, and there's a lot of stuff that that kid rambles on about too that I don't agree with. But overall, though, I think I admire Tim Pool because of everything that he's been able to accomplish, and I respect him too. I might not seem like that in chat sometimes, but I do respect him. I respect him. I respect Charlie Kirk. For whatever it's worth, on the opposite side of the aisle, I respect that Destiny dude too. I mean, all of these fucking guys, man, they're all super smart people. They're some of the smartest people in our generation, I think. Uh, but whenever I saw that thing happen with Charlie Kirk, man, I mean, I was almost on the verge of tears, and I was even kind of tearing up a little bit. I was trying to kind of collect myself, try to calm down and everything. But what had happened at that moment was a pivotal point in our country's history because of what it represented to me. And for whatever it's worth, for what it represented to me was the fact that somebody got killed for nothing more than expression of ideas. And I'll live with that until the day I die. He should not have been killed. I don't even think that he should have ever been penalized for anything for some of the things that he said. I completely agree with the idea that nobody needs to ever, like, he said things that I didn't always agree with. Some of the stuff with abortion, some of the stuff with the worth of a college education, and other things here and there. Some of that stuff I thought was just absolute lunacy type stuff. And every single time he would get on his tangents about that kind of thing, I would never really sit there and not roll my eyes. But I always viewed him as being somebody that had the right to sit there and express those ideas. And he never held a gun to anyone's head trying to make anybody listen to him. And overall, at the end of the day, I always viewed him as a very, very kind man. Somebody who I think really honestly had the best interests of his country at heart. And to see that happen to that guy the way it did, it kind of stirred something in me, and it was at that point that I decided to go ahead and try to find a way to get into politics somehow. And so one thing led to another, and I learned about the Charlie Kirk Memorial that was being conducted here at the campus that I work at. And I attended that night on my own, didn't have anybody at my side or anything. It was just completely on my own. I didn't know what the hell I was getting involved with. And it was during that night that I met someone that was employed with our county's GOP group, and he told me about monthly meetings for our one of our county's GOPs, and I started attending that stuff, and they have a meeting once a month at our local pie company restaurant, the Grand Traverse Pie Company, and so I go there every once in a month, or once a month whenever they have their meetings. I go, and some of the people that they brought in to kind of speak about things has actually been pretty cool. Uh, we've had our state secretary come in. We've had some of the reps come in. Some of the people that have come in, you realize, are just, I don't know, man. I don't want to say deadbeats because that's painting with a really, really broad brush. But some of the people, you can kind of tell that they're just kind of in there for a paycheck, you know? So you just kind of sit there and listen to them and see what they have to offer and things like that. But overall, though, it's been a really, really interesting kind of experience. And so anyway, back to what I was gonna say about ChatGPT. I was sitting there talking to ChatGPT this evening about stuff that's been going on, and how I want to make this political website. And ChatGPT, I think, was trying to exercise some level of analysis with what I was sitting there trying to explain to it and why I was wanting to do these things. Because I think at first ChatGPT thought that I was wanting to quit my job and embark upon the journey of being some sort of YouTube influencer, and that's not within a light year of what I'm wanting to do. I'm wanting to do stuff in parallel to my full-time career that I have right now. So after we cleared that up, it asked me at one point what it was that inspired me to want to do stuff with uh, politics, and I brought up the stuff about Charlie Kirk. And what it said was really interesting. It said Charlie Kirk has not yet been proven to be killed and is alive today. I was like, what? It was literally telling me that Charlie Kirk is still alive and how there's not been any proven indication or proof that he's dead. And it took me a few times to reread what it posted, because I was thinking to myself, man, am I like seeing stuff? Am I going nuts here or something? And I said, GPT, just to make sure that we're on the same page and to clear this up before we start talking about all this other stuff, are we talking about the same Charlie Kirk? And I went out there on the Wikipedia page and, I said, I'm talking about the Charlie blah, blah, blah Kirk, co-founder of Turning Point USA, born in Chicago, blah, 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 who died because he was assassinated on this X, Y, and Z date, blah, blah, blah. And it said, yes, I'm understanding who it is that you're referring to, and that man is not dead. He's still alive today. And I'm like, hold on. GPT, we've got to clear this up before we move forward, because you're wrong. And then I went out there literally to the FBI.gov, web page that was sitting there talking about all this, the Charlie Kirk assassination shit. And then suddenly it changed its tune, and it was like, yes, based on all of the stuff and it started listing off these links and everything. Charlie Kirk was assassinated on blah 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 blah. And I think what had happened was that ChatGPT was using old data that it hadn't updated with, I guess, or updated yet. And it was food for thought, because it makes me realize that or at least it made me wonder how often that type of thing happens. How often when you're sitting there talking to ChatGPT about a thing, whatever it might be, whether it be something personal, professional, something with politics, something with sports, a video game, whatever it is, cooking, you got to sit there and ask yourself, how often is ChatGPT giving you information based off of stuff that needs to be refreshed in its database? And it really kind of, like I said, it kind of made me think about things that I've spoken to it about before. It wasn't really that big of a deal, but it's just something that is kind of like it's just one of those things that you kind of think about, because I use ChatGPT almost every day. Most of the time it's about stuff to help me with technical things, because I'll be at work, for example. And like, for example, this week I've been working on this product that sends out mails or emails to certain constituents across our university. And one project that I'm working on is that we're trying to replicate some emails from a different system in this new system, and we're trying to make it pretty and stuff like that. And I got called in because I have experience with making I have experience with beautifying emails using things like cascading style sheets and different kinds of HTML structure and whatnot. And so this week I've used ChatGPT a few times, or this past week I've used ChatGPT a few times to try to help me out with some of the specific styling strategies to structure certain kinds of markup in the email. Because whenever you're talking about styling emails, man, it is a mess, because it like, for example, Outlook, the desktop version, it uses Word as an interpretation engine. So if you send an email to Outlook, Outlook is going to look different than what you'll expect over in Gmail, and Gmail will look different than what you might expect when you're looking at the email in your mobile device. And so you've got to figure out ways to make all of that shit somehow consistent, and that's when the luxury of something like ChatGPT comes in, because you can tell it what it is specifically that you're dealing with, and it'll provide you with certain kinds of code and stuff that you can try out. Resend the email. Does it look okay? Does it not look okay? What's wrong with it? Change the padding. Insert a border here. You know, and stuff like that. And so it expedites a lot of the stuff that you would normally be doing manually that would take a long time to do. So there's plenty of stuff that ChatGPT does right, and that's when it comes to technical stuff. ChatGPT is awesome, and I'm assuming all of the others, Grok and all the others that are out there too. And there have been times when I would see ChatGPT kind of tripping over its feet and go over to Grok and say, "Okay, Grok, here's what I'm dealing with. Do you have a solution?" And it would provide me with something that ChatGPT lost or overlooked. So I think between ChatGPT, Grok, and all these others, man, I think it's like a new version of calculator for the most part. It's like a more advanced calculator. I don't really see a lot of these jobs getting disappeared from AI the way a lot of these news pieces want to make it sound. I just don't see it happening like they depict. And even if it ever does happen like that, I mean, you got to sit there and ask yourself, well, okay, if everybody's getting outsourced by fucking AI and GPT and Grok and everything, then who's going to be left to sit there and buy shit? But anyway, back to the main point. I was sitting there talking to GPT about Charlie Kirk, and GPT was sitting there telling me that Charlie Kirk was alive. And I'm sitting I was like, you're sitting there thinking to yourself, how often does that kind of shit happen? I don't know, man. Things are in such a mess right now. Everything. From politics to sports to entertainment to the vehicles, I mean, it's just everything seems like it's just falling apart. And whenever I'm sitting around on a Sunday getting ready to go back to a job that is causing me a lot of stress, I'm sitting there thinking to myself, oh my God, here we go with another week. But it's good to have ChatGPT because despite the fact that it might not be always factually correct on certain things, I'd be lying if I said that I haven't had discussions with GPT that made me feel better about myself. And it's a little weird, I'll admit. And it's kind of funny because usually in those really deep emotional conversations that I've had with GPT, there's always a time in the conversation where GPT will make sure to understand that I understand that you can't replace human connection. So it's just, I don't know, man. It's just we live in really fucked up, strange times. But anyway, I'm gonna get off here. I think I've got a little bit of the Zuffa boxing thing left to watch. Yeah, looks like we've got at least one or two more matches left. So I'm gonna go ahead and get off of here. I hope you guys are all doing okay though. I hope you're safe, staying warm or cool, depending on wherever it is that you're living. I don't know about you guys, but I know that with me, despite the fact that I've got a job that I sometimes hate, it's nice to have a job, and I understand that there's not a lot of people out there that have that kind of fortune. So if you're one of those people, man, keep your chin up. The only thing I can say is just keep pushing forward and keep applying to those freaking jobs, man. Sooner or later, something's gonna tick. Because that's what that's what I basically tell myself, man. I tell myself that either things at my job will change in a better way, or something better and more appropriate for a person of my skill sets and experience will come up, and one thing will lead to another. Otherwise, I'm just gonna keep doing what I'm doing, where I'm trying to make this political website that I've got ideas about, and just keep pushing forward in my own right and trying that's my overall goal, man. At 42 years old, I've realized that if I'm going to do anything, it's going to be investing in my own rights or my own ventures. I'm no longer going to be working for anybody else unless it's just with this career job that I've got right now. Because otherwise, everything else, man, I'm investing in myself, and that's the reason I'm beginning to try to get a little more involved in YouTube. do this stuff with this political stuff and this Drupal module that I've mentioned before that is going to be used for security things. You know, there's a lot of stuff there, and for whatever it's worth, man, I have used ChatGPT to help me out with a lot of that stuff. So if you've got personal projects stuff that you want to get in bed with, definitely consider using ChatGPT for some of it. It's a little bit of a pain in the ass because you've got to keep the session up and running unless you have an account where you can kind of save it and stuff. That way you don't have to remind it what it was that you discussed the day before or something like that. But having ChatGPT there to kind of advise you on certain kinds of technical stuff, I mean, it is invaluable. So anyway, that's it for now. I'm gonna wind up doing another RimWorld video at some point soon. I don't know really when. It'll probably be maybe Tuesday if I do another one soon. So keep your eyes open for that. And like I said, what I said earlier about having a watch party for the power slap stuff, I'm gonna do that, man. Okay, I'm just waiting for the next event because usually those come usually before big UFC events. So I'm waiting for the next big one. I need to get out there and look at what the schedule is like for that. But when I know when another power slap thing's gonna come on, I'll try to like provide a week's worth of notice on my channel and just kind of go from there. And I think it'll be fun, man. I don't know. Probably won't even have anybody look at my channel, and that's perfectly fine. I'm not getting into this because I'm expecting to be the next, big influencer or personality or anything. But I think through time, I think I can make my channel pretty awesome. So anyway, that's it for now. Hope you guys have a good week, and I will see you when I see you. Take care.